New Super Mario Bros. Wii was released in 2009 for the Nintendo Wii. Now, while this series is often looked down upon in today's world due to its constant repetition of theming, music, and lack of gameplay changes throughout entries, it's still important to remember that when this game released for the Wii, most people were genuinely optimistic about it due to the fact that it was a multiplayer 2D Super Mario game on a home console. When New Super Mario Bros. DS released, the only way to play this game with a friend was through online multiplayer. So Mario Bros. Wii was a pretty big deal at the time because not only was it played on the big screen, but you could simultaneously play with 3 other people. So while this game doesn't seem like the most innovative Mario title ever, it was certainly held in high regard back when it was released. So anyways, as we've seen numerous times before, the premise of the game is quite simple. Bowser kidnaps Peach and your job is to play through each level until you make it to Bowser's castle, defeat him, and rescue the princess. However, to be fair, this game is meant to be played with friends, and even if you play it alone, gameplay is usually much more important in a 2D platformer. There are 4 characters you can play as this time around, including Mario, Luigi, Blue Toad, and Yellow Toad. Now, while I don't think it's a big deal, I feel as though some variety within characters would have spiced things up and made things more interesting, compared to just 2 simple Toads. Yay. But I won't waste time with that because I'm sure you've heard dozens of complaints about the character selection in this series of games. Once the opening cutscene is finished, the player is dropped straight into World 1, and it's nothing out of the ordinary. You get your typical grassy plains along with the usual starting enemies such as Goombas and Koopas. Although one difference between this game and the original New Super Mario Bros. Is the addition of Yoshi, who is introduced in the 3rd level of World 1. He plays pretty much exactly how you'd expect him to. His main features are the flutter jump and eating enemies as per usual. This level is also the first level where you can find a secret exit leading to a cannon. These cannons serve the function of launching the player a couple worlds ahead, and while I think it was a cool idea, it feels like a bit overkill on how far ahead you get sent after taking one of these. I mean, just look at this. The very first cannon you take in the game blasts you all the way to World 5. And that may not seem like too far, but there are only 8 main worlds in the game, so you're essentially skipping over half of the game, therefore missing out on tons of content. But I do think if you're a little kid playing this, you probably won't care much. I know I didn't back when I played this game as a kid. And it also offers great opportunities for speedruns. I mean, this game has some crazy speedruns. The community is pretty huge. Not as big as Mario 64's, but let's be honest, I don't think any game will ever achieve as much attention by the speedrun community as 64 does. Anyways, another great inclusion to this game is the Toad houses. These work much differently than they did back in the DS game, and it's honestly pretty great this time. There are tons of mystery panels spread around the wall, and in order to get an item you must match 2 pictures of the same power-up together. But there's a catch. Bowser and Bowser Jr. both have a set of their own panels thrown into the mix, and if you match one of these 2 character panels together, the minigame ends, and you take all the power-ups you unlock through the course of the game. Now to get to the first tower in the game, guarded by Larry Koopaling. Every tower and castle in this game are guarded by one of the 7 Koopalings, and at the time, this was fresh since we hadn't seen these guys since Super Mario Bros. 3, but now it's become an overused trope among the new Super Mario Bros. Series. Larry's castle is pretty easy as it should be. You get to use the ice flower to take out some dry bones as you scale to the top, but honestly that's really it. There isn't a special gimmick to this stage or anything, but I suppose that's how every first castle in a Mario game normally is. The fight with Larry is also extremely easy. He has no distinct or special moves except for using his wand against you, but every Koopaling does that. After you defeat him, you're free to complete the rest of World 1, which also introduces the first water level in the game, and I gotta say, these are nothing extraordinary. Water levels in 2D Mario games are almost universally hated by players due to their slow, repetitive, and tedious nature, and they are no different here. After this, we are introduced to this odd gimmick that hasn't appeared up until this game, but basically, if you run into this Goomba, it's different enemies within each world though, you are brought into a minigame of sorts where you must collect all the Toad bubbles within the stage. I would say this is extremely annoying, but it really isn't, simply because the Toads reward you with 3 mushrooms which come incredibly helpful later down the line. I think this is as good of time as any to talk about the power-ups in this game. These include the standard mushroom, fire flower, ice flower, and star power, which all function the same as always. The mushroom grows Mario bigger and gives him an extra hit point, the fire flower defeats enemies instantly, except those such as dry bones and beetles, The ice flower freezes any enemy except the boos, but it doesn't kill them immediately. They must be thrown into other enemies or ground pounded in order to defeat them. And last of these classic power-ups is the star, which, as you probably guessed, turns Mario invincible and grants him the power to eliminate any enemy that stands in his way. The mini mushroom is also brought back from Mario Bros. DS, and it works exactly the same as before, shrinking Mario down to the size of a pebble, and allowing him to run on water, but he also dies instantaneously upon impact with an enemy. Next, there are two brand new power-ups introduced for this game, those being the penguin suit and the propeller suit, or as I called it as a kid, the twister suit. The penguin suit functions the same as the ice flower, however, in addition to throwing ice balls, Mario gains complete traction on ice and doesn't slip at all while running on it. He can also slide on his belly in order to defeat enemies or unlock secrets. Lastly, there's the propeller suit, a source of many childhood fights due to trying to grab it from a question block before your friends could. This power grants Mario the ability to burst into the air and slowly descend. The propeller suit can be great for reaching secrets in the sky or blowing through levels, though I think it can be a little cheap sometimes. Also, when you win these power-ups from the Toad houses, they go into this little sub-menu where you can hold tons of each item in reserve. You can only equip these before the start of a level and not in the middle of a level like the previous game or Super Mario World. Now it's on to World 2, and as you may have guessed, it's desert themed. To be honest, this is probably my least favorite world in the whole game because I really just don't like the desert levels in any game, and I think many feel the same way as I do. There's something just so unappealing about these types of levels, as I've rarely seen them done in an interesting way in a Mario game. Except for the Sand Kingdom for Mario Odyssey, I mean that was really cool, obviously. This world also introduces dark-themed levels, and these levels really suck. You can barely see any of the levels you're playing unless you constantly shoot a fireball ahead of you or use a star to light up the whole way. The boss of this world is Roy, and I think his tower is actually pretty cool. I like how you have to constantly scale these fence-like platforms to the very top, and it's pretty cool how later in the stage, Roy uses his wand on you to add extra challenge while scaling the level. His fight is also pretty easy, but again, this is a pretty easy game, and all the boss fights function in a similar manner. The rest of World 2 is more or less the same, but I will say I like this one level where the wind occasionally blows Mario across the stage. It was a concept only used once in the whole game, so therefore it really stood out to me. Roy's castle is sort of a homage to the original Super Mario Bros., as you spend most of it trying to run through the correct pathway in order to proceed. It's kinda cool, nothing all too special though. The fight with Roy is pretty cool though. Kamek adds these pipes to the fight, giving Roy the ability to jump through them and attempt to fall on Mario. Other than that, it's a pretty standard battle, just stomp on his head 3 times and you defeat him. After that, it's time for World 3, the Ice World. So we went from my least favorite world to my favorite world in the game. World 3 is pretty fun. I usually enjoy these ice-themed levels in Mario games. I don't know, just something about the music and the overall vibe I really love. World 3 introduces the penguin power-up to the game. I think it adds a lot of fun to these stages, and it's funny taking it into another world where Mario looks horribly out of place dressed as a penguin. Lemmy is the guardian of this place, and at first he seems pretty weak and not intimidating at all, especially after coming off Roy. That is until you fight him, and you see him sitting on a gigantic magic ball. He then proceeds to make a bunch of mini magic balls, and these are kinda hard to avoid. Sometimes, they constantly try to push you off the edge of the stage. But wait, hold up, I completely forgot to talk about this tower, and it's pretty alright. I think the part where you're forced to ride on the rising platform avoiding dry bones and spike balls is pretty boring though. However, things get pretty interesting after this, as there's yet another concept not seen anywhere else in the game, but it works pretty well here. So the last 2 normal levels of World 3 are played like any other stage in the game. That is until you beat the second level and you unlock this red button, which changes both of these stages when activated. It adds red blocks to these 2 levels, and actually makes them much easier because they block off lots of endless pits. Completing the first of these 2 levels with the red switch activated is the only way to unlock the castle and proceed with the game. Meanwhile, all these red blocks do for the second stage is grant access to a secret exit, which only leads to a star house. All these do is provide Mario with the star power for his reserved items. The castle for this world is actually genuinely good in my opinion. I like how there are these little segments where you have to blow up ice using bob-ombs, and while I normally find snake blocks to be very boring in Mario games, I like the one in this level due to its ice physics, because if you hold onto the penguin suit that the level provides you, this section will be much easier for you. We already talked about the fight with Lemmy, so it's on to World 4 from here. This is the standard water level, and yeah, it's alright. If you hadn't noticed by now, most worlds in this game are pretty basic and they offer little to distinguish themselves from other Mario games. So for some reason, the penguin suit is given to you in a tropical beach environment, but nevertheless, it shows off another function that proves to be very useful, that being swimming. Swimming is so boring and slow usually, but with this power up, Mario flows through the water so easily. So you better not get hit by an enemy. Wendy is the next Koopaling in line to defend her tower and castle. This tower is pretty neat. I like these blocks that you have to avoid, otherwise you'll be crushed and instantly set back to the world map. And it also has a genuinely great secret location. The fight with Wendy is unique because she throws rings at Mario, which adds an extra layer of challenge. It's a good setup in difficulty compared to the previous fight. Since I neglected the ghost house in World 3, I might as well talk about them now. These are kind of a mixed bag for me, honestly, as I was never really a huge fan of the ghost houses in any game because they had the tendency to be tedious and feel pointless at times. In New Super Mario Bros. Wii, some of them are actually pretty decent, but others fall flat on their faces. I like how the secret exits require lots of attention from the player, as there is no way you're finding these without actively searching for them. The final level in World 4 introduces these flippable fences. Mario can punch certain areas of these and end up on the other side of them. There really isn't much use for them except grabbing star bits. Fighting Wendy this time around is similar to last time, however it's made much more difficult by the fact that it takes place underwater and you can't defeat Wendy while submerged in water. Once you beat her though, it's on to World 5, or it would be if not for the airship levels. There are 3 airships in Mario Bros. Wii, and just like Super Mario Bros. 3, they stand out as pretty respectable challenges from the rest of the game. You have to deal with a lot more enemies than usual, and most of these cannot be defeated as easily. You also fight Bowser Jr. in these airship levels, and his fights are a nice change of pace. In the case of World 4's airship, you take these propeller boxes and fly up and land on his head. Do this 3 times and he's defeated. For now. Finally, it's on to World 5, the forest-themed world within the game. This world really shows the first signs of difficulties within the game, because while it's still not that hard, things definitely get a bit crazier. Plus, World 5 is also home to that infamous level where you ride on a raft and keep as much enemies off it as possible in order to keep the raft proceeding. This level is an absolute nightmare in multiplayer mode, so much that it feels impossible at times, but even in single player it still gives you a run for your money. You fight Iggy in this world, and he's by far the most obnoxious and crazy Koopaling of them all. His first fight is pretty simple, just jump on his head while he bounces around these moving platforms, but his second battle sees him riding around with a chain chomp attached to his seat, and once you step on his head, the chain chomp's speed increases and it becomes a bit harder to avoid him. Still not too hard though. World 6 is another part of the game that I just dread playing. I'm not a fan of the enemies or level layout in this world. It is pretty difficult though, especially this one stage where you ride on a raft in the dark and must control the light attached to it with motion controls. This can prove to be pretty difficult when also trying to control Mario and defeat enemies. Now I get to perhaps the chunkiest of the Koopalings, Morton. This man's an absolute unit, and his tower is quite good. It has these 2 gigantic drills that shoot up and down the stage and leave little room to move around on. Once you get past all of this, the first fight with Morton is actually kinda hard, at least compared to earlier fights. There are these 2 drills on either side of the stage, and on top of that, Morton has a ground pound move that shocks Mario for a short time. World 6 hosts the second airship in the game, and just like before, it's pretty good. These airships are definitely some of the best stages in the game. The only downside I'd say is the fact that all of them are auto-scroll levels. The second face-off with Bowser Jr. takes place here, and personally, I think it's the best fight in the whole game. It's super unique and a lot of fun. You get to fight around in these bumper car machines and shove Bowser Jr. into these electric walls. Once you do this 3 times, the fight's over, and it's on to World 7. This is one of the better worlds within the game, and it also poses much more danger due to it being a sky-themed stage, therefore containing much more bottomless pits and risky jumps. It's also a good excuse to use the propeller suit a lot because a ton of levels in World 7 provide you with this. It also contains possibly the hardest stage in the game, where you have nothing to jump on except for these parabeetles. These small light ones float when you jump on them, and these large fat ones sink into the abyss as soon as Mario lands on them. This level is pretty fun, though I mean, the challenge should be expected due to the fact that this is the second to last main world in the whole game. Now we've reached the final Koopaling, Ludwig Ludwig, however you say it. His tower and castle are both difficult stages, especially when you try to go for all 3 star coins. The fights themselves are cool because it's almost like Ludwig is related to Yoshi because he hovers just like him. I especially like the castle fight where you stand on these 3 moving platforms that rapidly shift positions, all while dealing with Ludwig and his flutter jump. After all this, we finally reached the last world in the game. These levels can be very difficult when going for all the star coins, but they still aren't too bad when played normally. Except for this one level, I hate it so much, you know the one, where you're underwater the entire time and it's pitch black, literally the 2 worst elements to a Mario game right here. But now instead of fighting a Koopaling, you fight Kamek, and she's pretty underwhelming all things considered. You just wait for him to teleport, then jump on his head. He does make platforms disappear, but he likely won't be around long enough for that. Before the final fight with Bowser himself, you must first complete the 3rd and final airship. This is a long level, and pretty challenging at that. I appreciate that all the fights with Bowser Jr. are unique and intriguing, and this one is no exception. Now he'll shoot these giant bombs out of his clown vehicle while spitting fire at you, and you need to ground pound the floor, causing the bomb to jump up and hit him. Do this 3 times and you're all done with him for the rest of the game. At last, we've reached the final Bowser stage, and this is a nice stage. You constantly have to evade enemies and avoid lava bubbles and whatnot, but this isn't even half of it. The fight with Bowser himself is probably the best final fight in any new Super Mario Bros. Game. It's less of a fight and more of a chase sequence to the end. You have to stand in just the right places for Bowser to melt through the walls with his fireballs, all while trying not to fall into the lava below. The music for this part is also incredible. Once you reach the end and you step on that big button, Bowser will officially be defeated and Peach is all Mario's now. During the ending cutscene, Peach tells Mario about a secret World 9 while they're floating around in a hot air balloon. So surprise, once you've completed the game, World 9, also known as the Star World, opens up. Now in order to unlock even one stage within this place, you have to collect all the star coins in each world to gain the ability to play that world's respective level in World 9. And man, these levels can be tough. They really do feel like a final challenge for the player to endure, and they make for a fun reward for collecting all the stars. This brings much more incentive to the player to actually comb every level in the game in order to achieve 100% completion, especially World 9. Wow, this stage is tough. Getting all the star coins is an absolute nightmare as well. You have to deal with all these fire bros and piranha plants, and yeah, this is definitely up there in difficulty. There's also this one level where you have to jump on all these Koopas, otherwise you'll basically fall off and have to restart. I like when levels go out of their way to be more challenging without power-ups, such as this one right here. Overall, World 9 offers some great challenges to cap the game off, and I think it's worth it to see these levels for yourself at least once, as they're a fun way to test your skills and master the level layout. Just don't play these with friends, oh man, just don't do it. New Super Mario Bros. Wii certainly gets a lot of flack nowadays because people tend to compare it to its predecessor and successors. I just don't think this is fair at all because it was the first entry in the series to include multiplayer, as well as being the first 2D home console Mario game since Super Mario World. Sure, this game may be bland in a lot of areas, but to me, it is one of the best modern 2D entries. It still doesn't hold a candle to the likes of Mario World or Mario Bros. 3, but it can still be enjoyed from time to time, especially if you have friends to mess around with. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. Join me in the next one, and if you liked the video, subscribe and leave a like. You can always unsubscribe later if my content isn't to your liking. That's all for now. See you guys later.